On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Sasha Gainullin. He is the CEO of Battleface, and we're going to be talking about re-envisioning the travel insurance industry. We're going to talk to Sasha about how he went about doing that. And he first started off with one product. I think that's actually going to be a very interesting conversation. A lot of people think you have to try to boil the ocean. Sasha decided to actually attack this thing very discreetly, and it's obviously working. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about how he's actually re-envisioning his solution, how actually doing things in-house, the technology in-house is actually enabling that. We're going to see what those advantages are and how he's actually, envisioning all this stuff and hopefully cover a lot more. We'll see how much ground we can cover. Sasha, thanks for being on the
Mhm.
show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, before we start, tell everyone what you guys do over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am with a company called Battleface. Battleface is a travel insurance company, global travel insurance company that essentially uses technology to piece apart travel insurance into individual micro products and then put it back together based on travelers' needs, based on where they're traveling from, where they're traveling to, and even where they booked their travel through. We have the ability to custom build policies and products for our partners and for travelers internationally. And on top of that, we also do everything in-house outside of creating innovative travel insurance products and technology. We also service our customers. We process claims. We do emergency medical and travel assistance if somebody is in need of help while they're traveling. And we're 24/7.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so we're going to dive in and kind of unpack all of that because I think there's a lot of interesting components there. I guess, when we think of the travel insurance industry, people probably use it when they need it, or they might not be aware of it until they realize they should have had it. So in a lot of cases, I think it's an interesting part of the insurance industry. For you, you mentioned when you started the company that you had some choices to make, and you actually decided focusing on one core product, building one product was potentially the right decision. Talk us through a little bit about that decision and what that was.
Hmm. Sure, absolutely. So myself personally, I've been in the travel insurance industry since right after high school. So I've been around for quite some time. And myself and our team, we all come from a very similar backgrounds, everything to do with travel insurance, from product creation to servicing to technology. And what we started to see and experience within the travel industry space is that the travel industry as a whole have gone through a lot of changes in the last couple of decades, but the actual travel insurance industry has not evolved with times. Nothing really has changed. It was the exact same product that we were trained on 3 decades ago, that are still being sold today. And we know that we all travel differently. We all experience the world differently. We book flights differently, and we even work differently. Someday you could be working in Costa Rica, another day you could be flying back home and working from a different location. So when we first were starting, we there was a segment of travelers, contractors, journalists, independent travelers who were adventure travelers, we called them at the time back in 2017, who never could find the right travel insurance policy because the travel insurance industry has been built on one size fits all type of products. It didn't matter where you're traveling to, there's no customization. And if you're doing something extraordinary, then most likely it would be excluded in the policy. So, and we're talking about journalists going to emergent markets or conflict zones to do reporting. And it was around the same time when the media industry has gone through transformation of their own, walking away from the employee-based model to a contractor-based model. And as a contractor, you're supposed to go and get your own insurance. Or let's say we're talking about a surfer who's going to Bali, who doesn't want to have their luggage insured, but they want their surfing board insured. So how do you solve that problem? So that was a singular problem that we're concentrating on, essentially, in the solving this challenge. And the problem was pretty easy. The challenge actually came from Lloyd's of London, which is the origin of insurance, back in the UK, where underwriters at Lloyd's were saying, we love all of these risks, but our challenge here is how do you price for it real time? And that's when we've created technology that essentially allowed our underwriters to price out risks real time based on where are you traveling from, where are you going to, and what you're planning to do, and also how old you are. So and that was quite innovative, and that was prior to the pandemic.
Hmm.
And we all know that with pandemic, the whole world became specialty, where that technology really, really was useful.
Absolutely. To touch on this maybe a little bit further, I guess you mentioned identifying a very a small subset, or maybe I could be wrong, but what would be presumed a small subset of the entire travel insurance industry. And at that time, I mean, you mentioned, the label of, these are more adventuring type people. We've dubbed them various names since the pandemic. But that decision to kind of focus on that core underserved market, I think obviously you were in the insurance industry for a while. You saw this opportunity to concentrate on that particular group. Was there thought at the time of, hey, if this works, we'll expand it? Or would you have been happy at the time to have just said, you know what, we're gonna be a niche provider to this group, and I don't care about the next step after that.
Yeah, I think back then it was
Back then.
pretty just concentrating on the niche provider as a group because the travel insurance market is flooded with massive insurance companies, and you see them across
Mhm.
the industry here in the United States. You can compete with these companies because A, they pay massive commissions upfront to their distribution partners. B, they have a big footprint, and it's just all together. It's just like just there's no way you would be able to come in as a new provider into the space. But what was interesting is that the specialty side of travel insurance, the niche part of travel insurance, was left behind simply because um, these big insurance companies, they don't concentrate on these areas, and it requires customization, it requires technology. And what was interesting to us is that the conversion rates were pretty high in specialty kind of areas. Pricing, of course, is also different because another big issue in travel insurance is that, especially on the international side, destination Vietnam versus destination United States with $10 million in medical expense exposure, but the price is the same, is just not sustainable because we know that medical care cost in the United States is much more expensive. And so we knew that we had something interesting. And then as we dug into it further, all of these specialty travelers, they belonged to different associations and clubs. So, for example, there's an International Surfing Association with millions members. There's an International Federation of Journalists with millions of members. There's diving clubs, membership clubs. So it was pretty easy to build out a roadmap for distribution, not just from direct to consumer perspective, but also through partnerships. And our technology, the way it was built, it allowed us to also custom build products for these associations. And that was essentially the plan because we never thought that we would be essentially working in the leisure travel space. But that was before COVID-19. So,
I really like that because I think when I hear that, you identified the niche, you identify where you could actually bring value to that group, underserved, and forget about the rest. And I think a lot of
mhm,
times when you hear about entrepreneurs, they're like, "Well, here's the TAM," and you're like, "Well, that's great. You're probably not going to achieve that." But they're like, "Well, if I achieve a smaller percentage," and I think sometimes if you become a dominant player in the niche, you can actually expose others to the product and grow the product versus trying to take market share from a massive, wider area. And I think that's an interesting challenge every entrepreneur has.
mhm.
And as you've kind of have been building the product out, that core product, I guess, you mentioned that you guys focus on technology. Technology is a core. Was that an original part of the strategy, or was that born of experience operating within that niche?
It was kind of mostly both, right? Because we knew that we knew that the insurance industry was tech awkward It didn't have the technology behind it.
Hmm.
Especially in a specialty space, if you are a specialty traveler, let's say you're a traveler who is, and this is a real case, crossing Antarctica by foot. In order for you to get a policy with a traditional insurance company, you would have to go through endless amounts of application forms and Excel spreadsheets, and so we did want to change the landscape, and also because our initial partner as an insurance company was Lloyd's of London. That gave us a footprint into entering multiple jurisdictions at a time, at a single point. Because as Lloyd's is licensed across the world, we were, at the same time we were selling a policy in the UK and Hong Kong. And we knew that the only way for us to do it was with technology. But because we knew that we wanted to build a global company, and every jurisdiction, for example, from insurance taxation perspective, is also very specialized. For example, in Norway, there's no insurance tax. In the UK, it's 20%. So the only way to achieve that and scalability, it was technology as well. So it was kind of both, I think, at the end of the day, that we really wanted, and we knew that we needed to build a tech platform that could evolve with time, because eventually we wanted to handle our own claims, handle our own assistance services, and so on.
Fantastic. I love it. As the technology has been built to support the initiatives that you've kind of have seen. Obviously, you mentioned within the insurance industry, technology has been a bit of a laggard, right? I think now we're seeing a lot of insurance companies with GenAI push into
Yeah.
more data-related technologies and trying to speed things up. Talk to us a little bit about your decision of investing in technology and the competitive advantage that it might provide, a smaller company like you guys.
Well, you can just move much faster and quicker. And again, it kind of also stemmed from Lloyd's experience as well, and Lloyd's of London's advice, right? Because they knew that they've been around for 300 years,
Yeah.
400. So there's a lot of knowledge. And we were just lucky to work with very incredible kind of insurance companies at Lloyd's that were supporting us. And I remember at some point they wanted to have the flexibility where the change could be the rate could be changed that on the go, depends on what's happening in the world. So for example, before the pandemic, there were, I mean, maybe regional wars or kind of disruption or a regional pandemic, and where the underwriters wanted to have the flexibility to change an insurance rate, for example, based on exposure or based on the loss experience from the claims perspective. And so that really still, to this date, I credit everything back to traditional insurance companies knowing what they know, and us actually coming in and delivering that solution based on their advice, and then of course based on our knowledge and what we're seeing. So it was a more of a we didn't come into the space just off the street. Oh, here's the solution. It definitely still requires quite a bit of knowledge and experience in order for you to execute on this.
Fantastic. I guess as you're kind of, you've now been in the industry. You mentioned a long time, and obviously you're CEO of a company within the travel insurance industry. As you've kind of had a chance to observe kind of some of the fragmented nature of the industry, you've built your own niche product, you have technology supporting it. I was going to ask you about, I guess, touched on a lot of insurance companies are trying to play catch up and jump ahead with Gen AI. Obviously, they sit on lots of data. They face some challenges. As a CEO and a founder, do you see those as threats? I mean, are those things, those threats that are on your radar to how you are executing the business, or you just assume that everyone's trying to advance technology, but you still have your own roadmap and what you want to execute?
Yeah. For us, it's all just add-ons, right? AI, or at the time when we were starting out, it was like, was it blockchain or
Blockchain.
like that was a big buzzword. So for us, it's all how we can use technology and these features to improve on our operations, to improve on our gross margin, for example. AI for us right now is more of how can we actually be effective at what we do. not replacing us or replacing humans, but more of how can we improve on our operations and work with our customers, with our partners and our customers. So we always stay focused on the customer at the end of the day. What our customers are looking for,
Mhm.
and our entire leadership team is involved with customer from to this date. And for example, myself personally, I still answer calls. I still talk to customers. I still manage claims just to see what's relevant to today's travelers. Our mission as a company is to continue to deliver relevant products and services that are relevant today, right? So what we've done yesterday might not be relevant today anymore. And in order for you to stay relevant, you have to be connected to the customer. It doesn't matter if you have AI capabilities or, the best technology in the world. That's just a feature. If you lose that touch with the customer, then at least in our industry, in the travel insurance industry, that's where you're going to continue to stumble and you won't develop. And that's what's happened in the travel insurance industry and continues to happen as of today. Insurance companies are removed from the actual customer. And when you, for example, if you go on an airline and you buy your ticket and the travel insurance product that's being offered to you, and you're booking a flight, let's say you're flying to Nairobi, Kenya, and but the product that's being offered to you does not respond to what your actual trip is, and of course you're gonna say no thanks.
Mhm.
You're not gonna, and probably you did many times. You never probably bought insurance when you're booking a flight, simply because those products no longer speak to customers, and they're filled with benefits that you don't even need. For example, if you don't check your baggage and you're just going with your carry-on, but your policy has baggage insurance, why would you buy it? And then on top of it, when you want to talk to an airline about your product, they can't answer any questions. They tell you, well, here's a number, call this company. You call this company, they probably will give you an answer. But then in the event of a claim, you call another company. And in the event of emergency help, when you're in Kenya and you're in some type of medical problem, you call a third company. None of these companies are talking to each other. They don't know that sometimes they don't even know that they exist. And that's where this big disconnect is. And insurance companies unfortunately are falling short of that. And then anything that they develop, from technology perspective or product perspective, often don't even make sense because simply they don't talk to their own customers. So that's where the majority of the problem is in the industry.
Very interesting. I love that details. By the way, that's eye-opening. Because actually, yeah, I have purchased travel insurance, and I've actually now thought through as you're speaking. I was like, you know what? I actually have gone through some of this, and you're like, I really could benefit from parts and pieces of the travel insurance policy and not the others. And you end up having to come up with a weird ballpark of what you want insured because you're like, I really don't want the whole thing insured. I guess to touch on a little bit about the advantage that brings. So you're building the technology in house. You guys are
Mhm.
supporting the business. It's all forward thinking. When you're bringing these solutions to the industry, and it seems like you're differentiating because others can't do what you're doing. How is that impacting your standing within the industry and where you see that growth potentially?
So I know maybe it's a common thing only to us, but maybe I think it's a common thing for any startup that's growing. Of course, the initial problem that we talked about a few minutes ago to today, we kept discovering new problems and new challenges and the new innovations that would come after that. And of course, pandemic was one good example, where the trajectory of the company just changed overnight. So all of a sudden, our platform that was designed for specialty travelers was all of a sudden relevant to every traveler. So we found ourselves working with families that were vacationing in Spain, right? So all of a sudden, we work with regular leisure travelers, and which we never planned to be. Overnight, we became an organic direct to consumer brand that everyone is talking about. And luckily for us, our name was very memorable as well. So people remembered the name and it continued to develop in that sense. But then we knew it wasn't sustainable. So we knew that that was just short term. And eventually the world would come back to today's environment, and direct to consumer strategies are extremely expensive in travel insurance because it's not a mandatory line, and we just needed to move quicker. How can we now compete against the big players because we know that we have something special? So we've invested into technology again, and we flipped the model around where you as an individual are able to build your own products. Now we allow distribution partners to build their own products, because what we found in the course of us doing this work is that when you go on Expedia or Orbitz or Priceline or airlines, name them, they all try to differentiate themselves from their competitors. But once it comes to travel insurance product, they're selling the exact same product. So there's absolutely no difference. And so we worked really hard on figuring out a tech perspective where a partner can come in and build their own products and embed into their vastly different distribution platforms. And that allowed us to diversify our distribution channels away from just a single distribution type. We now are working with 70 to 80 different type of distribution types. So for example, visa processing companies or online travel agencies that specialize in pet travel, or embedding our products into membership plans or credit card plans or banks. Then we worked really hard on diversifying our platform globally, and follow the sun model, because another problem in the industry, even if we're talking to, let's say, a big insurance brand, global company, but for a global distribution partner, in order for them to launch a global product, they have to start all over again in Australia, in Canada, in Europe, because these companies, as global as they are, they're extremely disjointed. So that's what we were changing. And then, of course, the services part. And that's when we also opened up in 2023. We saw that it was quite interesting that a lot of insurance partners of ours that we work with were faced with the exact same problems. When they underwrite our products, they go through our platform and they do due diligence. And every time they would say, "This is great. How can we do that for our policies?" And that's when our I guess, company neutral name came about, Robin Assist. And we launched our brand. Robin Assist as a company is a tech service platform that services the entire travel insurance industry at large. So now, from also just concentrating on Battleface, where Battleface is powered by Robin Assist from the services perspective, you'll see Robin Assist powering a lot of travel insurance brands out there because they're using our technology and services. So that's kind of what we're seeing as a vision for the companies, continue to diversifying between the two entities.
Very cool, man. I love it. It started off with a super narrow focus, and the business has grown because you saw the drive into those areas. And I really, I think I've mentioned a couple of times, I don't think enough people talk about that. I think too many people focus on building a business thinking how big they can get it versus focus on a small area you can dominate. And if you're successful, you get the opportunity to expand or do something different, or yeah, maybe become the brand name. So I think what you've done is fantastic.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like now I never dreamed about the partners that we're working with that we would ever work with them, because now they're seeing the value, right? So, like you asked as well before, what was like some of the biggest challenges for us as a new brand coming into the market, and they are how expensive the distribution is, right? So for us as a startup to come in, we can't afford upfront fees, and that's what the industry was used to. We can't afford massive commissions. So, for example, we had somebody coming into us and saying, "Hey, we would love to work with you, but you have to pay us 75% of every policy sold." Okay, well, my comeback was okay. Well, average loss ratio for travel insurance, of course, every country is different, but let's say on average it's 30%. So if I'm paying you 75%, which by the way, that's not how much we make as a company, so that's not sustainable. Then guess who is suffering? Your customer. Because another challenge they said is that we don't understand why 9 out of 10 claims for our customers is being denied. And well, I'm like you can do the math, why your claims are being denied
Hmm.
because there's nothing else left for the insurance company to do. And what the insurance companies are doing are limiting benefits and expanding on exclusions. And and these products are just useless at the end of the day. And then what I think in the last few years has happened to the industry is that a lot of brands, travel distribution brands, are paying attention, and they're seeing that because conversion rates are dropping on traditional insurance products because consumers know what's happening. And what our partners are doing are concentrating on those conversion rates. How can I actually deliver relevant products at the right time and still add value to the customer?
Awesome, man. Sasha, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing your vision and direction. I think it's been a great conversation. If somebody does want to reach out to you just to follow up with you regarding something you've spoken about here on the show, what is a good way of connecting with you?
Email Sasha@battleface.com, Sasha, and then of course on LinkedIn.
I will make sure we include that in the show notes. Love the company name, by the way. Battleface is just so cool. But I really do appreciate you coming on. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a
A-
pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for the
Well,
episode. Be
cool.
back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, please share this episode with somebody else that might benefit from the topic. I think Sasha took us through the journey of his company and within the travel insurance, what he's doing to innovate and the changes that are impacting him and his business by focusing on really a narrow part and then expanding out. And I think it's a great story. And I think a lot of founders or people who want to be founders can learn a lot. So please do share this episode out. Also, like, subscribe, comment, leave the podcast a review. I'd love to hear from you guys. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.